design review.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, so we'll call this meeting to order on January 6th, 2022. I can't see everyone, Nate, so you want to call the roll of who's here?
Sure thing. Doug Wall.
Present.
Antonia Marinucci.
Okay, Anton.
Chris Lozier.
Chris.
And Marika Clark, welcome. This is Marika's first meeting with us, so welcome to the team.
Welcome, Marika.
And
all right, what's our, is that it?
Yeah, I don't see Alex.
Sorry, Alex will be here and Mia is already here. Okay, yeah. Everyone should be here today, and then someone else from our office is coming too.
Great.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt. Proceed.
That's fine. All right, Nate, call our first item.
Okay, our first item is 4302 John Avenue. Representative Justin Kapela, and I believe they're just applying for signage approval today, but I will let Justin talk about that.
Sure. Thanks, Nate. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So previously we had submitted our plans for the exterior renovations and then also some signage, but at the last meeting we didn't have the enlarged details of the trim details that we wanted to put around for the front facade. So the new plan shows a very enlarged detail and also the rendering of the front trim. And then we also put the signage on that rendering to represent the exact scale and color. So yeah, there we go. So you can see there on the left, you've got the existing building, with the yellow and everything. Then the rendering to the right, where we're going to go with the darker boral trim and the gold lettering, and so that dark trim matches the black windows. And then on the far right, it shows the enlarged details of, starting with the cornice down through the bed mold and the panel molding, and then the pilasters down on the corners of that. Basically, we're just encasing all of the old T111 trim with the boral.
Okay, so you're just going over the top of it.
Correct. Yep. Yeah,
Why
and if you
let me ask, why would you do that instead of removing it to get down to the sheathing? It's like adding another layer.
We could. I don't know what's back there, and underneath that old stuff. And with boral being pretty much indestructible and unrottable, I feel it's best to just cover up what's there. Less work.
Okay. Generally, it's not good practice to keep adding more layers to things, but
I have a feeling that, I could take a look at it, but I have a feeling that T111 is probably just the siding that's on the, it probably is the sheathing. But when we get into construction, I can take a look at it and see if it's, if we want to rip it off or not.
Okay, fair enough. So
I joined late. Are you talking just about the storefront or the?
Correct.
Okay, not the portion above the storefront.
No, well, at the last meeting we had talked about the windows and all of the trim work around the windows that we're doing. So I thought today was just to clarify the details of the storefront.
Got it.
Yep.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Is the relationship between the bottom trim and the brick as it's shown in the rendering, or as it's shown in the elevation? Because they're shown a little bit differently in both.
Let me see here real quick. Oh, it's gonna be, well, it's gonna be a little bit popped out. It'll be more like the rendering actually, and not like because the way we build out those corners, there's like 3 different layers there. You've got the first one, and then the pilaster, and then the base to it. So yeah, it's probably going to stick off that brick by 1.5 inches.
Yeah, I think that looks a little odd. If there is a way to keep that as minimal as possible, that I think that would help the overall feel of
Yeah.
of the
It's a
storefront
little
there.
exaggerated in the rendering, you know, that like with the shadow and stuff that's behind there. Just, you know, using Revit's it's not completely accurate, but I understand what you're saying, you know, about kind of having a floating pilaster there on the corner.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. When we get into construction, if I can peel back some of those layers and get that set back so it does set on the brick or as close as possible, maybe just the last 3/4 inch, you know, bottom piece. Yeah, but I'll try to get that as close to the brick as possible.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah,
I think that would be better.
yeah, I agree 100%.
All right. You said you had more detail about the signage as well?
Well, just what's on the rendering there, it's showing the 8-inch tall letters and the copper plate bold font that we'll use for the lettering there.
What physically are the material, is the material of the lettering? How thick is it?
It's metal. It's not true copper. I'm not sure what it's probably like a painted aluminum, I think is what they make it out of. But it's, you know, it's a thicker metal letter that you know that pops off the front face.
So it's a piece of sheet metal, basically. is
I
what-
think, yeah, yep.
And are those pin mounted off the surface, or are they just directly on the surface?
They're directly on the surface. Let me see. I don't know I can double check the thickness. Oh, they're a half of an inch thick.
Okay. Can I go back to the rendering to look at that again? Yeah.
Yeah, and I laid that out in AutoCAD as well, just to double check the size, and that's the length at which the letters will extend, just kind of like just over those two inside corners of the storefront glass there.
Okay. So these letters again are just individually cut letters mounted to the sign face. There's not another layer of.
There's
backing.
not, no, they're just the individual letters, yeah, placed onto the trim.
Okay. The only thing I don't see represented here when I look at the photograph is it looks like around that roof area, there's an existing gutter around the perimeter. And, you know, I see like there's some downspouts. Are you gonna just reattach the downspouts?
Yeah, and we'll switch to a black gutter and downspout there.
Okay.
Yeah, to match the dark trim.
Very good.
Do any of the committee members have any other questions or concerns?
Apparently not. So would there are no other questions or comments? Would someone care to make a motion?
I'll move to approve.
As presented?
Yes.
With the, I think would you want to add the
Chris's
condition of
comments.
trying to make that pilaster
Yes.
a little more flush with the brick?
Yeah, with, yes. Thanks, Doug. Yeah, subject to Chris's comments.
Okay. Someone like to second that motion?
I'll
I'll
second.
second
Okay.
either.
All right, Nate, please call the roll.
Sure. Doug Wall,
Yes.
Alex Frondorf,
Yes.
Antonio Marinucci,
Yes.
Chris Lozier,
Yes.
and Marika Clark.
Yes.
Okay, the motion to approve as presented with those comments is approved.
Okay.
All right.
All right, so our next,
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
thank you.
Bye.
Our next item on the agenda is the Cento renovation and rebrand at 1948 West 25th Street. I believe we have representatives from Dimitri Architects and Sam McNulty on the call.
Hello, folks.
Hi.
I'll start off real quick. Give it a quick background. So the original storefront was installed about 25 years ago. Doug, you might remember the exact date better than I would. We modified it about 10 or so, maybe actually no more, like 12 years ago, and put a version of like a nano wall system in the center, which we were never really happy with. It kind of threw off the symmetry and kind of cut up the opening too much, and didn't really get us to where we wanted to. Plus, as you see in the bottom center photo, without a foyer enclosure in winter, we put an exterior airlock, which looks kind of like a cancerous tumor on this beautiful historic Friesen-Scheele department store building. So having said all that, the plan is to remove the entirety of the existing storefront and get install this new black frame design that moves the entry to a double door on the south side, on the left there, and gets us back to kind of a respectful symmetry that aligns with the vertical elements of the upper floors of the Friesen-Scheele building. And I think it gets us to a much happier place aesthetically as you pass by on the street. The center third of the storefront will be an operable Renlita style door. So this is the kind that obviously just pivots up. And we think that's, again, more in keeping with the historic look. Like when it's down, it looks like a seamless part of the storefront, unlike a roll-up garage door or different other operable storefronts. We feel it's a much better aesthetic approach than even a nano wall style system. The building sconces will be replaced by a more subtle approach, LED downlighting. So they're dark sky rated, and the awning will be replaced. Right now, it's this kind of floppy, frumpy looking green fabric awning. So we're going to go with a little more of a clean lined light gray sunbrella awning that has a lower profile. And again, just kind of right now, the awning feels like it's just kind of slouching over the storefront and doesn't feel very welcoming, or doesn't feel like it's part of the building. We feel this awning, again, is more respectful to the historic, this beautiful terracotta facade. And that's pretty much it. Any questions, thoughts?
Well, the new place, when you're moving the entrance over to the side, isn't there a raised display platform currently on both flanking sides of the building there? Or doesn't that come all the way to the front?
Wait, raised display platform?
Yeah, where the booths are, basically on your sides.
Oh, in the interior.
Yeah.
Yep, that's correct. So that'll all be leveled. Like that'll be a level floor.
You're taking off.
What's that?
I think we lost him.
Any other questions or comments?
As Sam mentioned, there is part of the floor plan. It has an interior vestibule now at those double doors, so there will be no need for the exterior in the winter.
So what is happening to the historic components on the interior right there?
So we're gonna submit a separate plan for a full remodel of the first floor.
And will that include, or do you anticipate that being removing historical elements on the interior there?
So the ceiling stays and the walls stay, and we're gonna level that first floor. So all those the step ups throughout that entryway will be leveled.
Sam, right now, isn't there kind of a sort of like a diagonal setback? I'm having trouble kind of understanding, I guess because there isn't a plan, unless I just didn't see it. Is that getting flattened, or is that still part of it?
Diagonal step back.
Isn't it like, doesn't the facade kind of diagonally set back in the middle right now?
Oh, so yeah, correct. So where that, where the entry doors are in the very center, it does step back. I think it's like 20 inches or 24 inches. Yeah. So the new plan shows it being completely straight across with no setback.
And aligning with the building face above and bring everything kind of in line with that building structure.
Because I'm sure most of you guys know this was a department store building from the 1800s, and this storefront we're looking at did not exist before. It was open to the elements, and the actual building, the entry storefront was set back, whatever it was, 20-30 feet. So it was added at some point, we think in the 1900s.
In the riser, those platforms, those were original because those were encased in glass, right? And then the entrance was further in.
Correct.
So you would walk parallel with those.
Yeah.
Nate, can you open up a screenshot that I just sent in the chat to everyone, please?
I'm sorry, I got dumped out of the meeting when we were talking about those display platforms. And you say you're removing those in their entirety, or you're just cutting them back in order to allow access from the door on the side?
We're removing those in their entirety.
Are you guys able to see that? Or do I need to move my window?
You might need to we don't see it. You might need to stop share and start again or something.
Yep, 1 second. Now we good?
Yeah,
Awesome.
Rick, I was also trying to figure out what the existing condition is, and I feel like the screenshot from Google is illustrating it. So what portion of this facade is storefront is going to remain, and what will be replaced? Because we have floor detail, column detail. What portion of this? I think you just said, Sam, that it was 1900s that you feel that the current configuration is?
Yeah, we actually have no idea. We've been told it was some point in the 1900s. We're not sure. I
don't know if the construction of this building predates 1900. I used to know, but that was years ago. When the
That was
building belonged to Great Lakes Brewing. But
that was kind of the second half of my question is what, do you have any evidence of what their building was originally built? We're talking about the the display pieces, which I actually did not know that those were part of the department store.
Yeah, so the Freeze and Chili department store, if you look at that, that's a great image, by the way. Those step ups were display cases. They were glassed in. And so the
front
modern
door is
storefront
back
you
where
see
the
there
doors.
didn't exist. So
Back
you
in
can,
this picture, that's where the door, so all this was outdoor area with displays that you walked around and through these storefront displays. And to me, those are sort of a really unique feature of this, and to wipe all that out, I think, is a real part of the character of the building, you know, unless somehow we could determine which, I think they're original to the building, but, you know, I might be wrong. I don't know all the details of the history of the building. And the idea of bringing all the storefront out flush, you know, those two building columns, and the way the storefront is recessed now, I think is respectful of that feature. And so I think if you're gonna, you know, move the doors, then you should take that section of storefront and keep it recessed the way it is now. Looks more faithful to the, you know, design of the building.
We have Carl Brunges from City Landmark Commission. Carl, do you want to say something?
Yeah, if you can allow me to share screen, I can give you a shot of what it used to look like originally.
All right, let me, one sec.
Sorry.
I'd also be curious, just while Carl's doing that, if, I don't know, Sam or
Maggie.
if you happen to have, or Maggie, if you happen to have just a plan, I think it just would be helpful to see almost like what line is the storefront now along, like basically, is it sort of like ahead of the column or behind? I just think that would be kind of helpful to understand if
Yeah,
you have a plan that's easy to pull up while he's.
Sure, and I can try and do that. The other,
All right, Carl, this is very helpful. So you see this. This is how I remember it before, you know, when it was.
where we're proposing to have the line, so. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Cool.
sorry, Maggie. We'll
All
talk
right, my
about this
internet,
first
it just
and
said it
then
was
I'll pull up
insane.
the.
Yeah, so it's gonna be all in line there. The columns will be kind of embedded in flush with everything now.
Okay, got it.
So again, kind of holding that building facade from above more so.
So
as
you're
you
going
see
to
here.
take I'm sorry, in this picture, the line of the side storefront there, display area, is the line that you intend to continue on across the whole front of the building. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Correct. Yep.
See, I think that's wrong. That I don't think I'd be able to support that. I think you need to pull it back behind those columns. Those columns need to be freely expressed.
And I also have difficulty with removing of the historic risers there.
Yes, those seem to me to be integral parts of the original design of the building, and it's kind of an unusual feature. And so understanding that you're giving up a whole lot of usable floor space by leaving all those, you know, taking the glass out and making them seating platforms and so forth, and leaving they had roofs on them, you know, and leaving all that stuff was a great way to make them function in a way that supported, you know, your business without completely removing them from the historic record. So I have a hard time with removing those risers. And then lastly, you know, when you show the elevation, I think because your proposal is to bring the storefront out to the front, you know, it looks like the doors should be somewhere, the entrance should be somewhere in the middle of the building where you're moving it off to the side and just have a, you know, a big piece of glass or, you know, storefront system between those columns. So
I agree with you, Doug. And the divided lights there, the window panes, they're too large for this space, for this building. And the bars in between them need to be thicker, need to be more robust, sort of as the image shows directly above it, as the windows above it have it.
Yeah, well, what we tried
Yeah,
to do, with the vertical and horizontal elements is kind of echo and be respectful to the window openings above. So if you look, there's a pattern that's set above in the historic.
Yeah, no, I see that. It's just that the muttons, they need to be thicker. They need to be more robust. They're too diminutive. They're too thin for that building, for that space.
Ah, okay.
And I'd also like to add. I'd also like to add too that the proportions are much more horizontal than the verticality of the rest of the storefront along 25th as well.
I think the approach we took was to, really make this a very transparent facade, right? It was to really maximize our glass areas wherever we could. And I think in some ways that is respectful of the fact that there wasn't a storefront out at this level originally historically. But I hear what you're saying, that you want more historical references rather than kind of expression of the transparency is what I'm hearing.
Yes, and again, if you look at that piece of storefront that's at the right side of this photo at the end, what you see is very, tall vertical pieces of glass with a transom rail and then transoms above it. So I think trying to be mindful of that proportion would make it look more like it belonged and more like the original design intent without trying to, replicate it in a artificial sort of Disneyland way.
And you've tried to get away from the garage door look, but it still has the garage door look. And, and I have difficulty with that. And going back to Doug's part, I know you're trying to redesign this and you're trying to give it the space a fresh look. But I think with Cento, you integrated the historic elements very well in that space and preserve them. And I'd really like to see that happen here. And I think the door properly belongs in the center. And I don't think that I could vote to remove those historic risers or those elements.
Yeah, the historic risers aren't, we're going to submit separately for those. We did keep them initially because the historic tax credits were still in place. Those have long since expired. And
right, but we have to view the approval of this application, because where we approve the door, where the door goes is going to affect your floor plan, your flow, what you do with all that. So if we approve the door there, that automatically necessitates the removal of that riser. There's no way to do one without the other.
Yeah, you're right about that. We kind of did our best to accommodate the risers when we first opened, and it was always a difficulty for us and for ADA compliance. We had a lot of, on a regular basis, we had people complain about the step up. It just, like, imagine like in your living room having multiple levels and islands, and people, like, quite honestly, people were tripping and falling quite often getting off of those elevated booth sections. So we did the best we could to accommodate them. We even, if you go into space, you can see, like, we added wood steps and different, like that entire, because that entire front lobby was exposed to the elements, it actually has a pretty significant pitch from the sidewalk level to the rest of that main floor. So one side of the booth, you would step out and it'd be 6-7 inches. The other side would be 12-13 inches. So we definitely hope to level that floor to maximize the use of it. And what we're doing is we're removing the demising wall that was added back in 2003 and combining the main space into one. And then we want to activate the storefront by bringing the bar to the front. So have an island bar in that beautiful space. And when we do remove those risers, we are going to keep all the marble and historic elements, the ceilings, and keep them in storage so that should anybody ever want to add them back, they can do so.
Well, how about, I don't know if you considered this, or, you certainly have to study it, but what if you left the risers and you took the main floor area and, say, ramped it up, or put a handicap ramp and step up to something that's equivalent to the display riser level and made that the primary floor level instead of removing all the risers down to the lower level, which, as you say, is already pitched.
I think we'd be looking at a roughly 12-foot long ramp in that case, because that riser at the storefront is, say, give or take 12 inches. So that would leave him with not much of a patio situation.
Yeah.
Well, you're viewing this, when you say patio, so you're viewing this as sort of an indoor-outdoor space that you would open these folding windows and it would be, you're going to have a bar and seating in that area. I'm trying to better understand your concept for how you want to utilize this space. So you're talking about maybe a horseshoe bar or something in the middle and then seating around the perimeter. Is that where you're going?
Correct. Yes. And like the one thought we had was, because the area between the two columns was originally open to the elements, we thought it was, to some degree in keeping with that like idea that the storefront felt very open and airy and like penetrable and transparent.
Well, I would agree with that when the windows are in the open position, but when they're in the closed position, it sort of violates that. And so you said that you would use a nano wall type product for part of this, and you weren't very satisfied with the result. But when I try to imagine that opening, if you fill that with, folding glass door kind of thing, then it's still, even though it's not regular doors, it sort of still takes on the proportion of doors when it's in the closed position. And it looks like, oh, this could be the entrance to this space. So you wouldn't consider going back to, rethinking that center space as a folding nano wall kind of situation?
Having spent about $25,000 on it 11 or 12 years ago, and it completely failed to
In what
accomplish.
way? What way was it a failure? Keeping the air out, infiltration, or what? The use of it, the mechanics?
D, all of the above. We literally had snow. We literally had snow blowing in from the gap between the threshold and the door. We basically never opened them because we had to put insulation and waterproofing in to keep water from impinging in and going into there's a like the basement underneath there. So they were, and then what I wish I had a photo of them like when they're fully opened, because they stack up against the columns. The opening is actually pretty small, and yeah, you can see in that bottom middle photo how like bulky the vertical elements are. So when they're closed, they tend to obscure the view of the interior and the view from inside out. And then when they're open,
they do, but when I look at that photo, those kind of look like doors to me, even though they're not traditional swinging doors. And so that kind of looks right to me. And so that's what I'm trying to say. And maybe I think there are since, what did you say, 13 years ago you put those in there.
Yeah, something like that.
Strides in manufacturing and new manufacturers in the marketplace to sell those products. I mean, I used a product like that on the front of the Gray Lakes Beer Garden, and those have been successful for over 10 years. So
What's
I
funny
think
is if
what I'm trying to say is you may have had a bad experience with the product that you put in, but that's not to say that there are not products today that have, solved those issues.
Speaking of, if you ask Pat and Dan Conway, they almost never retract the roof or open those doors because they don't feel they're very functional. So we don't want to end up in that same situation like we did 13 years ago and Pat and Dan Conway are dealing with right now.
Like door nano wall function aside, Carl, can you give clarity on how the commission or the Secretary of Interior's views. This one is, I think, so tricky because there's so many interesting historic elements that were basically exterior that are now interior. Where does the line, where do we draw the line on what we have jurisdiction over? And how to properly review this when, like, literally the actual building entrance is, I think, like the gold doors.
Are that far back?
Yeah, like what's the
Well, it's
where is it?
changes that are over 50 years old are considered historic. And since these is not a 50-year-old change to the building, it can still be removed and still be considered interior. It is a tough question because it's now established as an exterior wall. But if you were doing a restoration, let's say if it's the tax credit going back, you would remove all this and keep the original.
Right, I mean, the tax credits required those original elements in what is now the interior, but let's call that the foyer, to remain. And,
Yeah, you would
and
want to
I
keep
think
it.
those are integral to the character of the building and the historic character of the building.
Agree. I would try to keep as much original as possible.
So
Yeah, this is a tricky one. So
Yeah, I mean, Sam, to be clear, from my perspective, this is so difficult because I want your business to be successful, and the new iteration of the business to be successful, but it's very difficult to determine where to draw the line in terms of what needs to be retained.
Yes, this is a very
I don't have a good answer.
Sam, is there a way to, I mean, you did it so, I know that you had some issues with it, but you did it so well with Cento, the use of the historic elements as an asset as opposed to a liability and integrating those into the functionality of the space. I'd like to see that in your new concept, those same elements be utilized in the same way or similar way.
I definitely hear you. I would say we did the best we could with a very difficult layout that actually was a very significant detriment to our business and just the safety of our guests, the people falling off of those steps of varying heights. In the same way, like stairs have you can't have stairways that have different rises and runs. Like we basically were dealing with that. Like someone get in on one side of the booth and it was X number of inches, and then the other side of the booth was X +4. And then just the basic, if you look at that photo, you can see how tall the step is, that marble step up to the booth. If you go into space now, we built, and I hate to say it, but they didn't turn out very well, and it was hard to put wood that would make sense up against marble like that. But we have steps that ring around those elements, those risers now built out of wood, just to try to make it a little bit easier for people to manage their footing. So like it was a massive detriment to our business because right now all the activity is deep in the space, and passerbys look at the storefront, especially when there's that winter enclosure, but even in summertime, and there's no activity in the front, and it is kind of a very unwelcoming environment to walk through.
Let me ask you another question. Those risers on the side look like they're fairly deep, like 5 or 6 feet. Is that right or not?
Like deep from
they cut back, into the center of the space. They angle back, and then the narrower portions where you have booths going out. Are those, like 5 or 6 foot deep booths? It kind of looks like they might be. I guess what I'm getting at is maybe another way to think about that platform would be to put a railing there with a drink rail and just offer, a couple of places to get up there so that it's more clear where the step is defined, and there's some sort of guardrail to help Makes that, and you could still have, say, deuces against the wall and maybe use the railing as a drink rail, something along that line.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say we've been in this space since '03, so almost 18 years, and we'll just say that the those elevated sections have always been a hindrance to both our guests' enjoyment of the space and our ability to run a successful business.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. So I'm trying to grasp at possible ways that, maybe not turn it into an asset with it, but more effectively, like if you joined those two islands together and maybe that was the line of your bar front, maybe the bar recesses in the middle where your hostess station is, and maybe there's a way to configure the bar that it mimics the outline of those platforms, and then they're useful. Maybe the bartender's going to be up, 8 inches from the floor, but that doesn't seem like that's the end of the world.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. We did study that, and we worked really, really hard to make that work, and just couldn't find a way to make the bar kind of encompass those two and still be functional.
I think a challenge with that would be also, I think we're all in favor of getting rid of the temporary vestibule on the exterior in the wintertime. And if you start to look at in this photo, you can see the depth between that center door and those elements is not very deep. And so if you start to put an interior vestibule there, you're really breaking up your space and making it very difficult to fit anything of significance in that front room. And really, it would be, I think, impossible to get a vestibule and join those two elements into a single bar in the middle, if we're talking about a center entry as kind of a primary priority as well.
One of the things I'm trying to weigh is these economic necessities on one hand and historic preservation on the other. And what I keep coming up against in my mind, though, is that you've demonstrated, I think, with some success that over the last decade, it can work. And it worked when the historic tax credits were needed. And so I think that that you've been there for so long sort of mitigates against the it can't work argument. Though I do hear you, and I'm not totally discounting it. I'm weighing all these factors.
I'm sorry, what I didn't understand that. What doesn't work? Like what argument?
No, what I hear the argument for removing these historic elements is that it creates an economic hardship, and it's hard to run the business as you would like it with those elements there. And I hear that, and I'm not discounting that. But I'm also considering that for the last decade or more, the business has run with some great success with those historic elements there. And so in my mind, Sam, it sort of cuts against that argument. I'm not discounting it entirely, but
that's really funny. And I'd be happy to show you my books to prove otherwise. So just because I've been handicapped for the last 18 years doesn't mean I want to continue to be.
Well, I think here's what I think is that you've obviously given this a lot of thought as your architect, but I think
I've given it 18 years of thought.
I think I don't know how the other committee members feel, but I'd like to see some other studies that would explain why these other directions would not work to retain these. And so, I don't want to make you spin your wheels and say, well, I've already looked at this, but we haven't, and I think I'm trying to work with you here, but this is a significant issue and for me and I think most of the other committee members. So if it's like somebody comes to us to propose demolition of an historic building, and we need to verify that there's no other way, that it could work. And so we ask people to go through the gesture, at least, of saying, okay, here's what it would cost, here's what's required, here's why this has to be torn down. So I think I see these other ideas sort of in my head, but I haven't laid them out. And so you might be exactly right. None of those ideas do work. But if you could, show us what your attempts were at trying to integrate those, maybe there isn't a way to make it work successfully, but, this has been, you say this has been an impediment to the success of your business, and I don't doubt you on that, but I look at it as Alex does, that this is an important part of the building to try to maintain, and maybe there's not a good way to make this work, but it not being a business operator, I don't know. You have the answer to all the questions of why it hasn't worked well for you. I look at it as an architect, and I say, well, this looks like a pretty good solution to that problem. And
Yeah. I'll candidly, but just between the folks in this room, I'll tell you what the motivation here is. So back in the day when I first bought the property, and I remember calling my mom that night, and she literally cried because she was like, well, first, her last memory of that being inside that store was when Freeze and Sheely went out of business, and she bought her firstborn bedclothes. And she's like, ever since we'd go to the market and we wouldn't go anywhere else because that neighborhood's so dangerous. She's like, you're gonna get killed down there. Fast forward a few years later, we're open. My mom takes a fall off of one of those booths. This would have been in 2007 or 8, and breaks her hip, and has dealt with that ever since. So it was always in my mind, like the minute these historic tax credits burn off, like we should take a look at this and make this a level floor for life safety. And then we just kind of kicked the can down the road. The business wasn't making enough money to justify a full renovation. So about 5 years ago, we started thinking again about it. Then the pandemic hits, and after the last 2 years, it was a question of, do we just shut the thing down and mothball the space and maybe lease it out to someone? Because when we were looking at it, it was a Payless back in 2003. The other contender to take over the old Market 25 space, that was the prior tenant, run by Ohio City Near West, which is now Ohio City Inc. It was between us and Payless Shoe Source. And then right at the last minute, a furniture rental place wanted to take it over. So we kind of were handed it because they were like, Payless Shoe Source, furniture rental, or these guys who are trying to do a Belgian beer bar. But anyways, after the last 2 years of pandemic, it was basically, do we just bankrupt the company, mothball it, paper over the windows and walk away? Or do we double down and reinvest in this historic building? And we're trying to make a go of it and do the best we can after the last 2 years of suffering that we've all been through.
Well, I understand. I think it would be easier for us to understand if you showed us some floor plans.
Yeah, we will, for sure.
But I think we're all in agreement that the flush storefront idea is a non-starter. I think the storefront, at least, in that center area between the columns and the little space on the sides, should be set back to, say, its current location, just behind the columns. And I don't know if, again, I haven't seen the floor plan, so I don't know how that impacts.
Maggie, should we pull up the floor plans?
I can do that. I also, while I do that, I just wanted to ask a question from the committee, which was, as we've discussed, this is not a historic tax credit project at this point, right? So we're not fully constrained by some of those regulations. And so I would wonder what your thoughts are as far as, obviously there's gonna be some construction of a storefront here that was never existing, right? Because of how far back that was originally. And what your thoughts would be on the contemporary compatible versus kind of replicating a historic look storefront for this new construction. And I just kind of wanted to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think that, even though this isn't, you're not seeking tax credits on this, our job is to follow the Secretary of Interior's standards. And that's part of it, whether you're asking for tax credits or not, because this is an historic district. So I guess that's my answer to that, is that we're looking to see that those standards are upheld and maintained.
Okay, so the contemporary compatible would be something that you would be looking to see.
So
I think it would
some
be,
temporary differences, are, part of the Secretary of Interior standards is don't make something new look like it had always been there. To create confusion. Make it look different and updated. And so that's always a judgment call then, how far along those lines is appropriate to go.
And that's where, like, why I was asking Carl in terms of where we have jurisdiction, because the defining architectural features of this entry are interior and exterior. So
Right, because this
when I
was.
say in plan, literally, where's our line drawn? Is it at that column? Or shortly interior to that, or is it going to extend to the historic entrance of this building, which would have been, further back?
I think it's the latter.
Yes, because it tells, the line in the sand is a 50-year change, if something was changed at least 50 years ago, then it becomes part of the history of the building. But none of these things are 50-year-old alterations. So judging it that way, all these storefronts were exterior features of the building back to the, original doors. Would you agree with that, Carl?
Yeah, and I just put probably the two standards that would affect this in the chat. So you do not destroy historic materials, and it should be reversible, is basically what it boils down to.
I think if I were looking at the interpretation of what Carl has sent in the Secretary of Interior standards, is that if that whole front portion needs to be maintained as the building entrance, obviously that's challenging for the building function, as you've made clear, Sam, and as a frequent patron of your business, I don't disagree with you on that side of things.
Glad to hear.
Please keep the fries. But then
I just want to stay in business and not have to shut it down, because that is literally what we're looking at.
I understand that. I just wonder if it is going to be interpreted to go all the way back in terms of enclosing the space. I feel like I would explore the possibility of maybe like a frameless curtain wall system, so it is kind of like a clear, as minimal as possible, so that it still retains that experience.
That was cleanest.
We were hearing earlier that the framing should be larger. So you're saying the framing should be more transparent?
Yeah, that was my comment just now, was in contrast to what Alex said. And obviously we can't, neither of our suggestions are meant to be, telling you what to do. It's more just like, do you consider going? And same with Maggie's question, is it going to be a contemporary interpretation? Is it going to be, it's ultimately up to you guys to answer, but that could potentially be an option to explore.
We certainly like the idea of more transparency from like being respectful to the historic elements of the building, and just from like a guest experience. And the sidewalk, as you're walking or biking by on the sidewalk, having a more transparent storefront just feels more welcoming, inviting, and kind of happy.
So let me ask, now that we're looking at the floor plan here, if the formerly exterior portion from the original front door is out to the street, you say is pitched from the street up, is it then your intention to leave that pitch? So what you're taking out, apparently according to this, you're taking out those front doors and that whole line across there and integrating the floor as one big unit. So is part of it going to be pitched, or are you going to account for that some different way?
Yeah, the floor slope will remain.
I'm sorry, the what?
The sloping of the floor, it will remain.
Will remain.
Yeah.
what do Maggie and Sam, what do you guys think about the idea if you were to, because I'm like looking at the plan here, I don't know if you feel like there would be room or not, but if you were to recess the middle section, so just as a hypothetical, if you were to keep the same pivoting center door, but recess it to behind the columns so that those columns still kind of appear as exterior to the facade.
That would be a big improvement.
Yeah, we actually, at our initial plans were to do that. It made it difficult to, so there's a counterbalance element on the interior that we have to kind of wrap and like, so it's kind of like, so it's essentially going to bulk up that column on the inside. So there wasn't a really functional way to do that without kind of botching up the look of the building, the aesthetics.
I'm not sure I'm 100% following, but maybe.
No, I don't, I guess I don't see that from what I'm looking at here. That, you know, recessing that center section of the storefront. I mean, if you're taking out all the platforms in the middle, so I don't see a dimension between the bar and the storefront wall there. So maybe if you're crowding the space between the front of the bar, well, shorten the bar by a foot or two. You know, assuming we were supportive of the rest of this.
Yeah, we can certainly go back and study that some more.
I mean, I think essentially, I mean, just speaking for myself, like, I feel like if there's a way to essentially keep, probably it would be keeping the line of the storefront similar to what it is today. So it's, you know, it's kind of at the flush with the edge of the facade on both sides, and then recesses sort of around the columns, and then you still have that center pivot door. And maybe there's a, maybe you do kind of an exercise of sort of a few different lines of the interior, kind of dividing light muns, and kind of doing an exercise of looking at a pattern that would sort of mimic the historic lines and ratios a bit more, where you have the transom rail and you know, kind of have those dividers, and use the historic photo to look at that. I think that would be kind of a useful exercise. And then maybe having the transom rail be a bit thicker, so that you read that line a bit more. Right now, I don't think that you really read that. And it kind of also felt like there was a horizontal that was kind of lower down that didn't really seem necessary. I think Chris's point about how there's more verticality might be worth looking at. But then personally, I feel like if we were to, you know, figure out a design for the actual storefront system that seems reasonable, like the keeping the interior risers is not a hill that I would be dying on. If you can keep them so that, like, in the future somebody can put them back in if they want. Maybe there's a way on the floor through materiality to kind of notate where they were so that you still read, or maybe even like reuse some of the marble somewhere on the floor so that you read through patterning the way that it was. I don't know. To me, that seems like it could be reasonable.
Without question, we are going to safely store all like those canopies and the poles that they sit on. Should anybody in future want to reuse them, because I mean, we appreciate the fact that this building's been here a long time and that gorgeous ornate plaster ceiling, and so there's a lot of historical elements like that that are very important to us. And for posterity, we want them to be, you know, thankful that we didn't just go in and gut the space and white box it. And so yeah,
as long as you keep the ceiling, I feel like the ceiling is just like such a beautiful element and is so important to the kind of denoting the different spaces.
That under our watch, that ceiling will never go away.
Is this meant for final approval today, or is this concept review?
We were hoping for a final approval.
Okay. Does the committee feel that we would vote favorably for final approval? I guess, Sam, it's up to you if you want us to vote first table it. I feel like if it's possible, my recommendation might be to switch this to concept and take our feedback. And I would also encourage you to take it to Landmarks Commission for a concept review at this level too, because I feel that they might also have valuable feedback in where they view drawing that line. And I don't want you to go back to the drawing board and do all this work based on our commentary and then have it be like a hard no for them that you can't touch anything. In
Yeah,
terms of risers and floors.
we're not gonna, so it's pretty clear, we're not gonna support this as currently shown. And so we're an advisory body to Landmarks. They may have different views or other comments or concerns. I think it would be helpful also, you know, I got dumped out of the meeting again, but to show on this floor plan, dot in the demolition area. Let's show on here where the line of the doors and the storefront is and the platforms, so it's more obvious the interaction between the existing and what's being proposed. I pretty much know where the storefront line is, but I don't know where all the lines of the raised platforms are relative to, you know, the proposed floor plan. But I think that would be helpful for anyone trying to make some judgment about this to see what the difference is.
Yeah, we can definitely kind of do it like an overlay where the
Yeah, show one version with the demo on it, maybe one without. That doesn't, I'm sure you've got that noted in your drawing file somewhere. It wouldn't be hard to turn on a demolition.
Yeah, we can certainly share those.
So what about the, you know, I would sort of view that as an issue too. In other words, the ceiling, that you have this decorative ornate ceiling out in the front, and then you're spanning that in the floor plan, so it's one big space, but then the ceiling's not the same. You know, what is the transition there look like, and where does it occur?
Yeah, we actually have been working. That's going to be one of the most challenging parts about the design of this project, is kind of like celebrating that beautiful ceiling and where it ends. Right now, there's like, well, when Great Lakes Brewing Company operated there, they actually cut out the ceilings in the balance of the space because they had 2-story fermenters in there, which, if you think about it, it's hard to believe, but that's how it was done. So all that ceiling is new and was just kind of patched in after the fact. So I've actually got a drawing that we just kind of, it's a little rough around the edges because I just took a quick PDF of it, but that's our reflected ceiling plan. We'll just say it's still evolving.
Well, now, see that, I guess, with that in mind, if I were in your shoes and I was trying to sell this, I could say that we're going to preserve the integrity of the division of space by highlighting that with the ceiling, you know, that the ceiling changes relative to things that were on the floor. And it might help your cause to, you know, go into that in a little more detail and say, well, here's how we're going to preserve some of the original integrity of the design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're definitely hard at work on that aspect.
But I don't see it now. So I guess where that leaves us, as far as I'm concerned, is that would you agree to us voting to table this while you take it to Landmarks Commission for a, you know, conceptual review, so we don't have to vote on it because the vote's not going to go your way. If I think
yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's the only choice we have. The reason we're submitting this at this point is there's a 12 to 16 week lead time for storefront material right now, and we're told that it could go longer. So we'll table it for now, and then we'll try to get as quickly back to, you know, and address all these points. When's the next meeting? How often does this?
We meet every 2 weeks.
All right, yeah, so our next meeting is it's going to be 11:30, January 20th, back on Zoom.
Cool. So yeah, if we could just get on the calendar for that. And when's the next landmarks committee meeting?
They meet 1 week after we meet, so landmarks is next Thursday.
But Doug, sorry to interject. I don't want to mislead anyone in thinking that because they came here, they can go to the next landmarks commission meeting. Those have also been quite delayed lately. So just because there's one the week after doesn't mean you're going to be on the agenda. And we would
Okay.
need your submission materials
Got
the
it.
Thursday prior to the meeting. So keep that in mind.
Got it.
The local meeting, at least,
Okay.
which is this one.
I guess
Nia,
Carl
you're
could address
muted.
that.
We are currently scheduling for our first February meeting at this point.
Ouch.
Yeah. Tell me about
I wonder
it.
if you could also potentially just request a meeting with staff for landmarks to, I don't know, I guess Carl, I don't want to volunteer you for that, sorry, but it might be an option if the meeting's a little further out to have that kind of concept level feedback.
Actually, that's helpful. We'll do that. Thank you. Who would we ask for that?
Carl.
Well,
You could also send me or Nate an email as well, and we'll forward it to the appropriate parties.
Myself or Don Pettit. Yep.
right, so if landmarks, for example, is scheduling it February 1st, then we still have another meeting in between. So if you want to come back to us with some other ideas at our next meeting, you're certainly welcome to do that.
We will absolutely do that. Yeah, appreciate that.
Okay.
If you guys have any questions in the meantime, don't hesitate to reach out to our office. We can always lead you in the right direction too.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. We'll get this right.
So we need a motion to table this.
I'll move the table.
Second,
Okay. The motion is to table. Doug Wall,
aye.
Alex Frondorf,
Aye.
Antonio Marinucci,
Aye.
Chris Lozier,
Yes.
and Marika Clark.
Yes, yes.
Okay, this item's been tabled.
Cool. Thanks everybody for your time. Appreciate the input.
Thanks for your feedback.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Sam.
Sam and Maggie.
All right, I think that concludes our agenda, does it not?
It does. So we can end the meeting.
All
We
right,
can
well then,
stop the recording.
Wait, Burrito's not here.
concluded. All right, thank you, everyone, and Happy New Year.
Thank you,
again.
and welcome Marika, our new committee member.